The Railroad, a clandestine organization operating in the shadows of the Commonwealth, emerged from the turbulent aftermath of the Great War and the rise of the Institute, an isolated scientific faction whose advances in synthetic humanoid technology posed profound ethical and existential questions for the inhabitants of Boston and its surrounding regions. Its origins are shrouded in secrecy, both by design and by the necessity of survival, as the organization was conceived to operate beyond the reach of the Institute's surveillance and the scrutiny of other factions whose priorities often conflicted with the protection of synthetic life forms. The founding members of the Railroad were motivated not by material gain or political power, but by the recognition of the Institute's growing influence and the potential for synthetic individuals, known as synths, to possess consciousness, autonomy, and the capacity for independent thought indistinguishable from that of humans, a development that challenged conventional perceptions of personhood and demanded a response that was both discreet and meticulously organized. Early documentation, though fragmentary, indicates that the Railroad coalesced as a loose network of sympathetic individuals, many of whom were former members of other factions or civilians with access to critical information about Institute operations, who sought to provide sanctuary and guidance to synths escaping the control of their creators. This formative period was marked by intense secrecy, the establishment of secure communication channels, and the careful mapping of safe houses and clandestine routes throughout Boston, ensuring that the fledgling network could function without detection. The name Railroad itself, reportedly inspired by an ancient term for covert networks that facilitated clandestine movement, reflected both the operational methodology and the philosophical mission of the organization: to provide a structured, reliable means for synths to achieve independence and mobility in a world dominated by factions with competing agendas. The early Railroad navigated a complex socio-political landscape in which the Institute, driven by its own vision of progress and technological mastery, pursued aggressive recruitment and reclamation of synths, often without regard for their emergent autonomy, and other local factions, including remnants of pre-war militias and opportunistic settlements, were frequently indifferent or hostile to the presence of synthetic individuals, further necessitating the development of a covert infrastructure that could operate with precision and discretion. Within this context, the Railroad developed protocols for identifying synths, assessing their level of consciousness, and determining the appropriate means of relocation, balancing the need for security with the ethical imperative to protect those capable of independent thought. The initial years were characterized by small-scale operations, often involving the extraction of individual synths from Institute-controlled environments, the establishment of temporary safe houses in abandoned or repurposed buildings, and the careful training of operatives in both combat and intelligence gathering to ensure that each mission could be executed with minimal risk to both agents and the individuals under their protection. Despite the inherent dangers, the Railroad's commitment to the protection of synths and the preservation of their autonomy allowed it to gradually expand its network, attracting like-minded individuals and refining its methods to respond to evolving threats, including the development of surveillance technologies, patrol routines, and the Institute's increasingly sophisticated efforts to monitor and control its creations. By maintaining a decentralized organizational structure, with autonomous cells capable of independent operation, yet bound by shared principles and secure communication protocols, the Railroad ensured both resilience in the face of discovery and the ability to coordinate complex operations across multiple locations, demonstrating a level of strategic foresight that belied the organization's secretive and ostensibly modest beginnings. The railroad's emergence cannot be understood merely as a reaction to the Institute's technological advancements, but also as a manifestation of broader philosophical considerations within the post-apocalyptic Commonwealth, where questions of identity, consciousness, and ethical responsibility were amplified by the collapse of pre-war societal structures and the stark realities of survival. The founders' recognition that synths, despite being artificial constructs, exhibited behavior, emotion, and decision-making processes that warranted recognition and protection, formed the moral foundation of the organization and distinguished it from other factions whose interactions with synths were transactional, utilitarian, or coercive. Early railroad cells were meticulously cautious, utilizing encrypted messaging systems, false identities, and elaborate cover stories to mask their presence, while simultaneously engaging in reconnaissance to identify institute operations, synth production facilities, and potential allies among sympathetic civilians, creating an intricate web of information that allowed the organization to operate effectively despite constant threats. Throughout this formative phase, the railroad's philosophy evolved alongside its operational capabilities, emphasizing not only the extraction of synths, but also their integration into safe environments, where they could exercise autonomy and, in some cases, participate in decision-making processes, highlighting the organization's recognition of the intrinsic value and agency of the individuals it sought to protect. The interplay between secrecy, ethical commitment, and operational sophistication defined the early character of the railroad, establishing patterns of behavior, decision-making frameworks, and cultural norms that would endure throughout the organization's existence. Its origins, therefore, represent not merely the establishment of a clandestine network, but the inception of a coherent response to a technologically and morally complex challenge: the protection and empowerment of synthetic individuals in a world shaped by human conflict, post-war devastation, and the relentless pursuit of control by factions such as the Institute, ultimately setting the stage for the railroad's continued evolution. Its central role in the struggles over autonomy and identity within the Commonwealth, and its enduring legacy as a unique and ethically driven faction within the canon of Fallout lore. The philosophy and guiding principles of the railroad are inseparable from the organization's raison d'être, emerging from the recognition that synthetic humans, or synths, produced and controlled by the Institute, possess qualities that demand moral and practical consideration, including self-awareness, autonomy, and the capacity for independent thought, characteristics that distinguish them from simple machines and elevate them to the status of entities capable of moral agency and personal choice, which in turn necessitates a framework of protection and advocacy that the railroad meticulously constructed to operate in a world dominated by human-centric power structures and factions often indifferent or antagonistic to synthetic life. At its core, the railroad's philosophy revolves around the belief that synths are not mere tools or property, but sentient beings with inherent value and rights, a position that directly challenges the Institute's treatment of its creations as objects to be deployed, recalled, or decommissioned according to the Institute's priorities, and this foundational principle drives every decision, tactic, and long-term strategic goal undertaken by the organization. From the design of its clandestine operations to the selection of members and the training they undergo to carry out missions with precision and ethical integrity. The moral framework of the railroad is further defined by an emphasis on autonomy and informed choice, whereby synths are not only rescued from environments that restrict their agency, but are also guided towards spaces and circumstances where they may exercise self-determination, receive education about the broader world, and participate in decision-making processes that affect their future. A commitment that reflects a deep philosophical stance on the nature of consciousness and the responsibilities owed to beings capable of thought, emotion, and complex reasoning. The organization's ideology is also pragmatically oriented, recognizing that the exercise of ethical principles must be balanced with operational security, risk management, and the practical realities of survival in a post-apocalyptic landscape where the Institute wields unmatched technological superiority and other factions, such as the Minutemen, the Brotherhood of Steel, or opportunistic settlements, may pose unpredictable obstacles. Thus, the railroad's philosophy encompasses not only abstract ethical precepts, but also the cultivation of strategic patience, discretion, and adaptability to ensure that its mission is sustainable, effective, and minimally compromised by external pressures. Central to the railroad's philosophical outlook is the rejection of coercion in favor of voluntary alignment and collaboration, whereby potential allies, informants, and operatives are engaged through persuasion, shared purpose, and ideological resonance rather than force or intimidation, reflecting a belief that enduring change and protection of synthetic autonomy cannot be achieved through domination, but must be built upon trust, mutual respect, and a shared understanding of the intrinsic value of sentient life, even when that life is artificially constructed. The organization's goals, therefore, are an operational manifestation of this philosophy, encompassing both immediate objectives, such as the safe extraction of synths from Institute control, the provision of secure havens and resources, and the mitigation of threats from hostile factions, as well as longer-term aims, including the establishment of a society in which synths can coexist independently, the dissemination of knowledge about the nature and rights of synthetic beings, and the cultivation of networks capable of sustaining resistance against institutional forces that seek to undermine these freedoms. The railroad's philosophical underpinnings also address the complex ethical dilemmas inherent in a world where the distinction between sentient and non-sentient entities is continually tested by technological advancements, where operational decisions may involve calculated risk, and where the organization must balance the safety of individual synths against the broader objectives of the movement, all while maintaining secrecy and avoiding unnecessary exposure that could jeopardize both personnel and those they are sworn to protect. The emphasis on consciousness and autonomy extends beyond mere survival to encompass moral and intellectual development, with the railroad actively seeking to create conditions in which rescued synths can explore their capacities, develop independent judgment, and integrate into environments where their agency is recognized and respected, effectively fostering not only physical freedom but also the psychological and social dimensions of independence, a testament to the organization's holistic approach to liberation. The philosophy of the railroad also intersects with practical considerations of identity, security, and resistance, emphasizing that the protection of synths requires a nuanced understanding of both human and synthetic behavior, the ability to anticipate institutional strategies, and the careful management of information, communications, and alliances. all of which are guided by an ethical framework that prioritizes respect for life, informed consent, and the avoidance of unnecessary harm, even when operating in morally ambiguous or high-risk scenarios. In articulating its goals, the railroad explicitly rejects approaches that treat synths as mere commodities, instead framing each mission and each operational decision within the context of sustaining and enhancing the autonomy, dignity, and well-being of synthetic individuals, which, in turn, informs protocols for rescue operations, the design of safe houses, methods of recruitment, and the selection of personnel capable of executing missions with the combination of technical skill, discretion, and ethical sensitivity required for success. Further, the organization's philosophy is inherently forward-looking, emphasizing resilience, adaptability, and continuity, acknowledging that the Institute's technological evolution and the ever-shifting political landscape of the Commonwealth necessitate a movement capable of anticipating change, innovating in its tactics, and maintaining adherence to core ethical principles despite evolving challenges. The railroad's emphasis on voluntary cooperation, strategic patience, and ethical rigor extends to internal governance, with leaders such as Desdemona exemplifying a philosophy of collaborative leadership, moral accountability, and careful deliberation, ensuring that operational decisions reflect both the organization's ethical commitments and the practical necessities of clandestine action, while also fostering an internal culture that values reflection, critical assessment of actions, and alignment with foundational principles. Ultimately, the philosophy of the railroad and its articulated goals represent a coherent, integrated system of thought and practice, wherein ethical commitment, operational strategy, and long-term vision converge to define a movement uniquely positioned within the Fallout universe as a champion of synthetic autonomy, a carefully coordinated network of agents and safe havens, and a living experiment in the application of moral principles under the pressures of post-apocalyptic survival, institutional opposition, and the enduring challenges of technological and societal transformation. In this sense, the railroad's philosophy is not merely a set of abstract principles, but a practical, actionable framework that informs every aspect of its existence, from recruitment, training, and intelligence operations to mission planning, extraction protocols, and long-term strategic planning, reflecting a holistic understanding of the moral, social, and operational dimensions of protecting and empowering synthetic life, and ensuring that the organization remains both principled and effective within the complex, dynamic, and often perilous environment of the Commonwealth, ultimately embodying a canonical vision of ethical resistance, thoughtful activism, and sustained commitment to the recognition of consciousness and autonomy as fundamental imperatives that define the very identity of the railroad as a faction within the Fallout universe. The organizational structure of the railroad is deliberately designed to reflect the imperatives of secrecy, operational security, and strategic resilience, evolving over time from its initial loose network of sympathetic individuals into a sophisticated, decentralized framework capable of coordinating complex operations across the Commonwealth, while maintaining the safety of both operatives and the synthetic individuals it seeks to protect. At the apex of this structure are the leadership figures, most notably Desdemona, whose role encompasses strategic decision-making, oversight of missions, and the articulation of the organization's guiding principles, ensuring that all cells operate in alignment with the broader ethical and operational objectives of the railroad, while simultaneously allowing for flexibility and autonomy at the local level, recognizing that rigid hierarchical control would compromise the organization's security and adaptability in a hostile environment, dominated by the Institute and other factions with competing interests. Beneath this leadership layer, the railroad is organized into discrete cells, each composed of operatives with specialized skill sets tailored to the needs of clandestine operations, including reconnaissance, intelligence gathering, infiltration, extraction, logistics, and communication, with the decentralized nature of these cells ensuring that the compromise or destruction of any single unit does not expose the entirety of the organization, a structural principle that has proven essential in the context of operating under constant threat from the Institute's surveillance, advanced synthetic tracking capabilities, and the unpredictable interventions of other Commonwealth factions. The recruitment and placement of operatives within these cells is a deliberate process guided by both demonstrated competency and ideological alignment, emphasizing discretion, loyalty to the railroad's mission, and the capacity to operate autonomously under conditions of extreme secrecy, with new members often undergoing rigorous evaluation and training before being entrusted with active operational roles, and their integration into the organization carefully managed to minimize exposure and risk. Communication within this organizational framework relies on secure, encrypted channels, covert messaging systems, and face-to-face interactions where necessary, with strict protocols governing the flow of information to prevent inadvertent disclosure of sensitive details, safe house locations, or identities of synthetic individuals under protection, reflecting a structural philosophy that prioritizes operational security while maintaining sufficient coordination to execute complex, multi-cell missions, including simultaneous extraction operations, surveillance of Institute facilities, and the delivery of supplies to safe houses distributed throughout Boston and surrounding regions. The railroad's leadership also establishes operational guidelines, contingency protocols, and ethical boundaries for cells, providing a framework within which individual operatives exercise judgment and initiative, ensuring that the organization remains adaptable, responsive, and principled in the face of evolving threats, technological advancements, and the unpredictable behavior of both human and synthetic actors within the Commonwealth. Within this structure, certain specialized roles have emerged, such as Tinker Tom, whose expertise in improvisation, technical manipulation, and covert logistics exemplifies the kind of operational versatility valued by the railroad, and Deacon, whose skills in infiltration, intelligence, and identity management provide critical support for both strategic and tactical objectives, demonstrating how the organization leverages individual strengths while maintaining cohesion and alignment with overarching goals. The railroad cells are further distinguished by their use of safe houses, clandestine meeting points, and secure routes, all coordinated under the guidance of central leadership, but executed locally by operatives with intimate knowledge of the terrain, urban geography, and social dynamics of the areas in which they operate, allowing the organization to move resources, personnel, and synthetic individuals with minimal risk of detection, and providing the redundancy necessary to mitigate the impact of unforeseen disruptions, including potential infiltration or attack by the Institute or other hostile entities. Training and indoctrination within the railroad reflect both operational and philosophical imperatives, emphasizing not only technical proficiency in areas such as combat, stealth, hacking, and extraction logistics, but also deep understanding of the organization's ethical framework, history, and long-term strategic objectives, ensuring that operatives internalize the dual commitments to efficacy and principle that define the railroad as a unique entity within the post-apocalyptic socio-political landscape. The structure also incorporates mechanisms for accountability, reporting, and decision-making, albeit adapted to the constraints of secrecy and decentralized operations, enabling leadership to monitor performance, coordinate multi-cell operations, and respond to emerging threats without compromising the anonymity or security of operatives or synthetic individuals under protection, reflecting an organizational philosophy that balances oversight with empowerment, risk management with operational flexibility, and strategic cohesion with local autonomy. Logistics and resource management within this structure are similarly decentralized but coordinated, involving the discrete acquisition, storage, and distribution of supplies necessary for the sustenance of operatives and rescued synths, including food, medical provisions, equipment, and technical resources, with careful attention paid to maintaining operational cover, minimizing traceability, and ensuring that each cell has the capacity to function independently when communications or support from central leadership may be temporarily disrupted. The railroad's organizational framework also accounts for contingencies, including the potential loss of leadership, compromise of cells, and rapid shifts in the strategic environment, incorporating redundant chains of command, emergency protocols, and predefined fallback strategies that allow for continuity of operations even under severe stress or active pursuit by the Institute, demonstrating a level of institutional foresight and planning uncommon among factions in the Commonwealth, yet essential for survival and effectiveness in the high-risk environment in which the railroad operates. The decentralized cell structure facilitates innovation, adaptability, and rapid response, allowing individual units to tailor tactics to local conditions, exploit opportunities presented by the urban and suburban environment of Boston, and respond effectively to institute movements, factional interference, or emergent threats, while maintaining alignment with the broader mission and ethical commitments articulated by leadership, thereby creating an organization that is both resilient and coherent despite its distributed nature. Leadership oversight extends to the integration of new technologies, intelligence methodologies, and operational techniques, with ongoing evaluation of tactics to ensure they remain effective, secure, and consistent with the philosophical foundations of the railroad, reflecting an organizational culture that prizes both intellectual engagement and practical competence, ensuring that operatives are not merely executing orders, but actively participating in the strategic evolution of the faction. The railroad structure, in sum, represents a deliberate synthesis of ethical commitment, operational pragmatism, and security-conscious design, balancing the need for secrecy, the protection of synthetic individuals, and the capacity for coordinated action, while fostering autonomy, accountability, and adaptability within its network of cells, thereby creating a faction capable of enduring institutional pressure, technological threat, and environmental challenges, and maintaining its mission across both short-term tactical engagements and long-term strategic objectives. Ultimately, the railroad's organizational structure is emblematic of its identity as a faction uniquely equipped to navigate the complex, dynamic, and morally nuanced landscape of the Commonwealth, exemplifying the principles of decentralization, operational security, ethical coherence, and strategic resilience that define its canonical role within the Fallout universe, and providing the foundation upon which all subsequent operations, decisions, and ideological commitments are built, ensuring that the organization can continue its mission of safeguarding synthetic autonomy and agency, despite the relentless pressures imposed by the Institute, other factions, and the unforgiving realities of a post-apocalyptic world. The process of recruitment and training within the Railroad is both deliberate and highly secretive, reflecting the dual imperatives of operational security and the cultivation of personnel capable of executing complex missions in a hostile post-apocalyptic environment, while simultaneously upholding the organization's philosophical commitment to the protection of synthetic life. And this process begins with the identification of potential operatives who demonstrate not only practical skills relevant to clandestine operations, but also an alignment with the Railroad's ethical framework and dedication to the principle of autonomy for synths, requiring recruiters to exercise acute judgment in discerning candidates who possess the intellectual capacity, emotional resilience, and moral discernment necessary to navigate the complex and morally ambiguous situations that arise during missions. Initial contact with prospective members is typically indirect, utilizing intermediaries, covert, observation, or anonymous communications to assess character, aptitude, and ideological compatibility, without exposing the candidate to unnecessary risk or prematurely revealing the existence of the Railroad, reflecting the organization's overarching emphasis on security and discretion, and ensuring that the recruitment process itself does not compromise operational integrity or endanger those already involved in the network. Once identified, potential operatives undergo a phased induction process that includes rigorous evaluation of their physical abilities, problem-solving skills, adaptability, and discretion, often through practical exercises that simulate conditions encountered during real-world operations, including infiltration, surveillance, rapid decision-making under pressure, and the handling of sensitive information, thereby allowing leadership to gauge the candidate's capacity to perform effectively in situations requiring both competence and judgment. Ethical, alignment, and ideological comprehension are assessed concurrently, with recruits exposed to the history, philosophy, and operational objectives of the Railroad, including the organization's principles regarding the autonomy, protection, and empowerment of synthetic individuals, ensuring that each operative internalizes the moral rationale underlying the faction's mission and is prepared to apply this understanding when confronted with ethically complex scenarios during extraction operations, intelligence gathering, or strategic decision-making in the field. The training curriculum is multifaceted, encompassing technical skills necessary for clandestine operations, including the use of improvised tools, hacking of terminals, covert communication methods, the maintenance and deployment of equipment, and navigation of urban and rural environments under conditions of threat or observation, as well as tactical instruction in stealth, combat avoidance, and, when necessary, defensive measures against hostile entities or factions, all conducted under controlled conditions designed to simulate operational realities, while minimizing risk to the recruit, existing operatives, and synthetic individuals under protection. In addition to technical and tactical instruction, training emphasizes situational awareness, critical thinking, and rapid decision-making, preparing operatives to respond to dynamic, unpredictable situations such as unexpected encounters with Institute personnel, detection by other factions, or emergent threats in transit or within safe houses, fostering a culture of initiative, adaptability, and resilience that is essential for the decentralized operational model employed by the railroad, wherein individual cells must frequently act independently while maintaining alignment with overarching strategic objectives. Psychological preparation is also integral to the training process, with recruits instructed in the importance of maintaining composure, managing stress, and exercising judgment under conditions of moral ambiguity, including scenarios in which decisions must be made regarding the prioritization of resources, the timing and method of synth extraction, and the potential exposure of operational networks, reflecting the organization's recognition that technical skill alone is insufficient for effective performance in the complex and ethically charged environment of the Commonwealth. Operatives are further trained in covert communication protocols, including the use of encrypted messaging, coded signals, dead drops, and clandestine meetings, all designed to ensure the secure transmission of intelligence, coordination between cells, and the safeguarding of synth identities, locations, and movements, thereby reinforcing the organization's capacity to conduct multi-cell operations without compromising operational security. Mentorship is a critical component of training, with experienced agents guiding new recruits through practical exercises, field operations, and ethical deliberations, providing real-time feedback, modeling the integration of skills and philosophy, and instilling confidence in the recruit's ability to operate autonomously when required, thereby strengthening both individual competence and collective cohesion within the decentralized network. Recruitment also accounts for specialization, matching operatives to roles that align with their particular strengths and aptitudes, whether in field operations, technical support, intelligence analysis, logistics, or leadership, allowing the railroad to leverage diverse skill sets while maintaining a unified operational philosophy, ensuring that each member contributes maximally to the organization's mission while minimizing redundancy and exposure. Ongoing training and evaluation are continuous processes, with operatives periodically reassessed to ensure proficiency, adaptability, and ethical adherence, and provided with updated instruction in response to emerging technologies, institute tactics, or shifts in the operational environment, fostering a culture of perpetual learning and strategic evolution that enables the railroad to maintain effectiveness despite the dynamic and high-risk landscape of the Commonwealth. The induction of new recruits is closely monitored and integrated with the organization's intelligence-gathering operations, as each operative represents a potential vector for both capability and vulnerability, necessitating careful balance between empowerment and oversight, and the establishment of accountability mechanisms that protect both the individual operative and the broader network, while reinforcing the ethical and philosophical commitments central to the railroad's identity. The philosophy of training extends beyond operational competence to the cultivation of judgment, empathy, and strategic foresight, preparing operatives to make decisions that weigh immediate tactical success against long-term consequences for both the synthetic individuals they protect and the sustainability of the organization itself, thereby embedding ethical reasoning into the operational fabric of the railroad. Extraction simulations and field exercises are a key element of training, replicating realistic conditions such as surveillance, evasion, high-risk navigation, secure transportation of synths, and contingency planning in the event of unexpected interference. ensuring that operatives develop not only proficiency but also confidence, situational intuition, and the ability to adapt protocols in response to novel circumstances, while reinforcing adherence to operational security and ethical standards. Recruitment and training also include instruction in the management of safe houses, including their identification, maintenance, concealment, and the secure movement of personnel and synths within and between locations, reflecting the organization's strategic emphasis on logistical efficiency and protection of sensitive assets. The integration of intelligence analysis into training ensures that operatives can interpret institute behavior, anticipate potential threats, and make informed operational decisions, while maintaining ethical consistency and minimizing risk, reinforcing the railroad's capacity to execute coordinated, data-driven operations despite the decentralized nature of its cells. In all phases of recruitment and training, the emphasis on ethical alignment, operational competence, adaptability, and discretion serves to create operatives capable of functioning autonomously while remaining fully integrated into the larger organizational philosophy and strategic objectives of the railroad, ensuring that each member not only contributes to immediate operational goals, but also embodies the long-term vision of the organization in promoting autonomy, protection, and agency for synthetic individuals, thereby sustaining the faction's mission in the complex, morally nuanced, and technologically sophisticated environment of the post-apocalyptic Commonwealth. Ultimately, the railroad's approach to recruitment and training exemplifies the faction's commitment to combining ethical principle, practical skill, and strategic foresight, producing operatives who are not only highly capable in technical and tactical matters, but are also philosophically grounded, morally discerning, and prepared to navigate the extraordinary challenges inherent in safeguarding synthetic life in a world defined by institutional power, environmental hazards, and the unpredictable dynamics of post-war society, ensuring the enduring effectiveness, resilience, and canonical significance of the organization within the Fallout universe. The railroad's network of safe houses and infrastructure constitutes a critical component of its operational effectiveness, reflecting both the organization's strategic foresight and its commitment to safeguarding synthetic individuals while maintaining secrecy in the face of constant threats from the Institute and other hostile elements within the Commonwealth. And this network is characterized by careful selection, concealment, and maintenance of locations that provide secure environments for the temporary or long-term housing of synths, as well as logistical hubs for operatives conducting extraction, intelligence, and support missions, with the overarching objective of creating an interconnected system that enables freedom of movement, operational coordination, and the protection of sensitive assets without compromising the anonymity of those involved. The identification and establishment of safe houses begins with meticulous reconnaissance and analysis of urban and rural environments, assessing factors such as accessibility, visibility, proximity to institute patrols or factional presence, structural integrity, and the potential for long-term concealment, allowing the railroad to select locations that offer both practical utility and strategic security, often repurposing abandoned buildings, forgotten basements, attics, or hidden rooms within occupied structures to minimize suspicion, while providing the necessary space and facilities for synthetic occupants and operatives alike. Each safe house is integrated into a broader clandestine infrastructure, connected by a system of covert routes, back alleys, tunnels, and discrete transit methods designed to facilitate the movement of synths and resources with minimal exposure, allowing the railroad to execute multi-node operations in which extracted individuals can be transferred between locations efficiently and securely, reflecting an operational doctrine that prioritizes both flexibility and redundancy. 2. Prevent compromise of the overall network should a single location be discovered or threatened. The maintenance of these safe houses involves rigorous attention to detail, including the concealment of entry points, monitoring for signs of surveillance or infiltration, and the careful management of supplies such as food, medical provisions, clothing, technical equipment, and communication devices, ensuring that each location remains functional, discreet, and capable of supporting both short-term and extended operations without drawing attention from the Institute or other factions, a practice that underscores the railroad's combination of tactical efficiency and operational security. Safe houses are also equipped to support the psychological and social needs of synths during periods of transit or residence, providing environments in which individuals can regain composure, understand the context of their extraction, and begin the process of integration into the network of the railroad, while maintaining strict privacy and autonomy, reflecting the organization's recognition of the necessity for both physical and psychological safeguarding as integral to operational success. Operatives assigned to safe house management receive specialized training in surveillance detection, risk assessment, emergency protocols, and secure communication, ensuring that each site is actively monitored and protected, with protocols in place to respond to potential breaches, unexpected encounters, or tactical exigencies, thereby creating layers of security that preserve both the immediate and long-term integrity of the network, while also enabling operatives to maintain situational awareness in complex, unpredictable environments. Logistical considerations within the infrastructure extend to resource distribution, with carefully coordinated supply chains that move essential provisions between safe houses and operational bases, employing discrete transportation methods, hidden caches, encrypted communication to prevent interception by hostile forces, illustrating the railroad's capacity for sophisticated, decentralized operational planning that aligns ethical imperatives with tactical necessity, and ensuring that all locations remain viable for ongoing missions without attracting attention. The railroad's infrastructure also includes contingency planning for rapid relocation, emergency extraction, or destruction of safe houses in the event of compromise, reflecting the organization's understanding that resilience is as essential as concealment, and that operational continuity depends on the ability to adapt rapidly to changing circumstances, whether through relocation of synths, temporary suspension of activity, or reconfiguration of transit routes, demonstrating a level of foresight and adaptability that allows the organization to maintain its mission under extreme pressure. Communication between safe houses and operative cells is tightly controlled, utilizing coded messages, encrypted signals, dead drops, and face-to-face coordination where necessary, ensuring that operational plans, status updates, and intelligence regarding institute movements or factional activity can be shared without exposing the network, while also maintaining a culture of accountability and responsibility among operatives to preserve security at every level of the infrastructure. The strategic placement of safe houses takes into account not only immediate security considerations, but also broader operational patterns, allowing the railroad to stage extraction missions, coordinate multi-location operations, and provide sanctuary in diverse geographic contexts, from densely populated urban areas to more isolated rural settings, reflecting a nuanced understanding of spatial dynamics, population density, and environmental factors that influence the likelihood of detection, pursuit, or interference by adversarial forces. Within these locations, the railroad implements protocols for identity management, ensuring that synths and operatives maintain appropriate cover stories, disguises, and documentation as needed to navigate public or factional scrutiny, further reducing risk while facilitating mobility, interaction with civilians, and engagement in necessary operations without compromising security, demonstrating the intersection of ethical responsibility, operational pragmatism, and tactical innovation. Infrastructure planning also incorporates redundancy and cross-checking, such that multiple safe houses can function as substitutes or relay points in the event of disruption, with operatives trained to adapt routes, schedules, and procedures in real time, reflecting the organization's commitment to resilience and its anticipation of the unpredictable behaviors of both human and synthetic actors in the environment, ensuring that no single breach can undermine broader operational objectives. Technological integration plays a role as well, with the use of surveillance detection devices, communication encryption, and logistical tracking tools implemented in ways that enhance operational capability without compromising the clandestine nature of the network, demonstrating the railroad's capacity to leverage available technology to support its mission while maintaining strict adherence to principles of security and discretion. The ethical dimension of infrastructure extends to the treatment of synths within safe houses, with procedures designed to protect autonomy, provide information about the broader context of the railroad's mission, and allow for informed participation in decisions regarding transit, relocation, and eventual integration into safer environments, highlighting the organization's consistent emphasis on respecting the agency of those under its protection, even as it navigates complex logistical and tactical challenges. Training for operatives responsible for infrastructure management also emphasizes rapid assessment, improvisation, and scenario planning, ensuring that each safe house can function effectively under diverse conditions, including potential incursion, natural hazards, or operational disruptions, allowing the railroad to maintain continuity of operations and the safety of synths without reliance on rigid procedures that could be exploited by adversaries. The railroad's infrastructure strategy is thus an intricate combination of security, operational flexibility, ethical commitment, and tactical sophistication, enabling a decentralized network of cells and safe houses to function coherently while minimizing exposure, risk, and compromise, and allowing the organization to execute extraction operations, intelligence gathering, and logistical support with precision and discretion. The cumulative effect of these measures is a resilient, adaptive system that not only protects synthetic individuals, but also sustains the operational viability of the railroad under conditions of extreme threat, demonstrating a canonical example of organizational ingenuity within the Fallout universe, where careful attention to location, security, communication, logistics, and ethical consideration coalesces into a cohesive network capable of sustaining the faction's mission over the long term. Ultimately, the railroad's safe houses and infrastructure embody the intersection of strategic planning, operational sophistication, and ethical responsibility, providing the structural backbone for the organization's clandestine activities, ensuring the protection, autonomy, and mobility of synths, supporting operatives in executing complex missions, and securing the continuity of the faction's philosophical and tactical objectives within the volatile, contested, and technologically advanced environment of the Commonwealth, thereby solidifying the railroad's status as a uniquely capable, morally driven, and strategically resilient faction within the canonical landscape of the required Fallout universe. The rescue operations conducted by the railroad represent the core of the organization's mission, embodying the practical application of its philosophy of protecting synthetic individuals and asserting the autonomy of beings whose consciousness and self-determination are systematically controlled and monitored by the Institute. And these operations are characterized by meticulous planning, operational discretion, and the integration of intelligence, logistics, and tactical proficiency, all executed under conditions of extreme secrecy and constant risk, as the organization navigates a post-apocalyptic environment in which detection by the Institute, interference by other factions, or environmental hazards could compromise both the success of the mission and the safety of the synthetic individuals involved. Each rescue begins with the collection and verification of intelligence regarding the location, status, and vulnerabilities of the target synth or group of synths, often relying on a combination of informants, reconnaissance, surveillance, and intercepted communications to construct a comprehensive operational picture, allowing operatives to assess threats, anticipate Institute response, and plan the optimal extraction route while minimizing exposure and risk to both agents and synthetic individuals. The planning phase incorporates detailed contingency measures, including multiple extraction routes, fallback safe houses, and pre-positioned resources, as well as protocols for rapid communication and coordination between decentralized cells, reflecting the railroad's strategic emphasis on resilience, redundancy, and adaptability, and ensuring that operations can continue even if unforeseen circumstances arise, including detection by Institute personnel, environmental obstacles, or unexpected behavior by the synths themselves. Operatives assigned to rescue missions are selected based on skill, experience, and familiarity with the specific operational environment, with teams typically including a combination of reconnaissance specialists, infiltration experts, logistical support, and communication coordinators, each trained to execute their roles with precision while maintaining adherence to the organization's ethical and operational guidelines, emphasizing discretion, efficiency, and the protection of synthetic autonomy. Infiltration techniques employed in these operations vary according to the target location, level of security, and technological defenses employed by the Institute, and may involve the covert entry into buildings, underground facilities, or restricted areas, the evasion of automated defenses, and human patrols, the manipulation of security systems, and the utilization of cover identities or disguises to blend seamlessly into the surrounding environment, all executed with the objective of minimizing confrontation and ensuring the safe removal of the synths while maintaining the secrecy of the railroad's network. Extraction procedures are carefully choreographed to account for both the immediate needs of the synths and the operational security of the mission, with protocols for rapid movement, temporary concealment, and secure transportation to predetermined safe houses, and operatives trained to respond to unpredictable variables such as environmental hazards, interference by Institute personnel, or the synth's own responses to sudden displacement, demonstrating the organization's capacity to adapt strategy and tactics in real time while upholding its ethical commitments. Logistics and equipment play a critical role in rescue operations, with operatives equipped with tools for bypassing electronic locks, neutralizing or avoiding security measures, communication devices for coordination across cells, and resources to support the health, sustenance, and immediate needs of the synths during extraction and transit, reflecting a systematic approach to mission preparation that integrates technical, tactical, and ethical considerations into a cohesive operational framework. Intelligence gathering prior to and during rescue operations is continuous and dynamic, with operatives monitoring institute activity, tracking personnel movements, analyzing security protocols, and adjusting operational plans in response to emerging data, ensuring that the timing, route, and execution of extractions remain optimized for safety and effectiveness, and allowing for rapid adaptation to unforeseen developments without compromising the mission's objectives. Training and experience of operatives are particularly critical during the extraction phase, as the act of removing synths from institute-controlled locations often requires quick judgment, improvisation under pressure, and the ability to make ethically and tactically sound decisions in high-stakes situations, balancing the immediate safety of the synthetic individuals with long-term considerations for operational security and the preservation of the railroad's network. Communication during rescue operations is strictly controlled, employing encrypted channels, coded messages, and pre-arranged signals to maintain coordination among team members while preventing interception or tracking by adversaries, thereby reinforcing the organization's overarching principle that effective action must be integrated with security and discretion at every level, from planning to execution and post-operation assessment. Contingency planning within these operations extends to scenarios in which the Institute attempts pursuit, retaliation, or surveillance during or after extraction, with protocols for diversion, rapid relocation, temporary concealment, and fallback safe houses designed to ensure that both operatives and synthetic individuals can evade detection, maintain autonomy, and reach secure locations, demonstrating the railroad's capacity to integrate strategic foresight, ethical commitment, and operational flexibility into every aspect of mission execution. The railroad also emphasizes post-rescue care, providing synths with access to secure environments where they can recover, gain awareness of their circumstances, and exercise autonomous decision-making regarding their next steps, while simultaneously monitoring for potential threats, providing logistical and medical support, and preparing for eventual integration into broader networks of safe houses or supportive communities, thereby ensuring that the immediate success of extraction operations translates into long-term protection and empowerment for the rescued individuals. Ethical deliberation is embedded in every phase of rescue operations, requiring operatives to weigh potential risks to themselves, other synthetic individuals, and the broader network against the urgency and necessity of immediate action, ensuring that all decisions reflect both the organization's operational objectives and its foundational commitment to the autonomy and welfare of synths, highlighting the moral rigor that distinguishes the railroad from other factions whose priorities may be limited to power, control, or survival. Historical operations documented within canonical Fallout sources illustrate the complexity and variety of these rescue missions, ranging from the extraction of individual synths from urban institute facilities to the coordinated relocation of multiple synths across significant distances using intricate networks of safe houses and covert transit routes, demonstrating the organizational capacity to adapt tactics to environmental, technological, and situational variables while maintaining consistency with ethical principles and strategic objectives. The railroad's success in these operations is attributed not only to careful planning, skilled operatives, and robust infrastructure, but also to the philosophical foundation that prioritizes respect for synth autonomy, informed consent, and the protection of life, ensuring that each action taken in the field reinforces the organization's mission, supports long-term strategic resilience, and embodies the canonical principles that define the faction within the Fallout universe. Ultimately, rescue operations are the tangible expression of the Railroad's identity, philosophy, and operational expertise, integrating intelligence, logistics, tactical skill, and ethical deliberation into a coordinated effort that consistently prioritizes the protection, autonomy, and agency of synthetic individuals, sustaining the faction's mission across the Commonwealth, demonstrating the unique capabilities and resilience of the organization, and solidifying its status as a morally and operationally distinctive entity within the canon of Fallout, providing a model of clandestine efficacy, strategic sophistication, and ethical rigor in the complex, contested, and technologically advanced landscape of post-apocalyptic Boston and its surrounding regions. The technological resources and tools employed by the Railroad are integral to the organization's capacity to operate clandestinely, protect synthetic individuals, and conduct missions with precision and security in the Commonwealth's post-apocalyptic landscape, reflecting a combination of ingenuity, adaptability, and ethical commitment that allows a faction of limited size and material resources to compete with the technologically advanced institute while maintaining secrecy from other factions, and this technological framework encompasses a range of devices, implements, and methods designed to facilitate secure communication, covert movement, surveillance, infiltration, and extraction, all calibrated to meet operational objectives without compromising the autonomy or safety of synthetic individuals under protection. At the foundation of the Railroad's technological infrastructure are communication tools, including encrypted terminals, coded messages, and improvised signaling, systems that allow decentralized cells to coordinate operations, share intelligence, and respond to emergent threats while minimizing the risk of interception or tracking by the Institute or other adversarial factions, reflecting a strategic prioritization of information security and operational discretion that is essential to the faction's survival and effectiveness. The Railroad also employs a variety of improvised devices and technical adaptations to manipulate and bypass Institute systems, including hacking of security terminals, electronic lock overrides, sensor disruption tools, and mechanisms for creating diversions during extraction missions, demonstrating the organization's capacity to adapt available technologies to meet specific operational needs while maintaining compliance with ethical objectives, ensuring that tools are used to facilitate the protection of synthetic individuals rather than for offensive aggression against human populations. Operative toolkits are designed for versatility and portability, encompassing both everyday items adapted for covert purposes and specialized instruments, including lockpicks, portable power sources, electronic jammers, and concealed storage devices, which collectively allow operatives to engage with a range of environmental challenges infiltrate secured locations, and maintain discretion, reflecting the integration of practical ingenuity, tactical awareness, and ethical restraint in the design and utilization of technological resources. Surveillance technology, both improvised and repurposed from pre-war or institute sources, plays a critical role in the railroad's operations, enabling operatives to monitor patrol routes, anticipate institute responses, detect potential surveillance or tracking measures, and plan extraction and movement with precision, while remaining mindful of operational security and the necessity to avoid detection, illustrating the faction's capacity to merge observational intelligence with practical intervention tools in a manner that prioritizes stealth, efficiency, and the safety of synthetic individuals. The railroad also leverages technological solutions for the management and maintenance of its safe houses and logistical infrastructure, employing devices for secure storage, communication relays, environmental monitoring, and contingency signaling, allowing decentralized cells to maintain operational cohesion, adapt to changing circumstances, and provide consistent support to rescued synths without exposing the network to unnecessary risk, highlighting the interplay between technological innovation and organizational strategy within the faction. Improvisation and technical skill are central to the use of these tools, with operatives trained to modify, repurpose, and fabricate devices as needed, using available materials and knowledge to solve operational challenges, exploit weaknesses in security systems, and maintain functional advantage over adversaries with greater resources, thereby maximizing the efficacy of technological assets without requiring large-scale manufacturing or pre-war infrastructure, and demonstrating the railroad's ability to adapt creatively to the constraints of a post-apocalyptic environment. Extraction operations in particular rely on the integration of technology and tactics, with operatives employing tracking devices, encrypted communication, portable concealment systems, and improvised transportation methods to coordinate movement of synths, mitigate risks from institute detection, and ensure the secure transit of individuals across a network of safe houses, reflecting the operational sophistication that allows a relatively small faction to execute high-stakes missions with precision and minimal compromise. Ethical considerations inform the selection and application of all tools, with an emphasis on minimizing risk to synthetic individuals and operatives, while maximizing the capacity for autonomy, freedom of movement, and operational discretion, ensuring that technology serves the mission's moral and practical objectives rather than enabling coercion or exploitation, and reinforcing the organization's philosophical commitment to the recognition of synth autonomy as a central operational principle. The railroad also incorporates elements of surveillance countermeasures and detection evasion technology, including techniques for masking digital signatures, disrupting tracking protocols, and concealing movement from both human and technological observers, enabling operatives to navigate hostile environments while preserving secrecy, security, and the integrity of ongoing operations, and highlighting the faction's ability to integrate knowledge of enemy systems into practical technological adaptations. The design of tools and technological methods is closely tied to the decentralized operational structure of the railroad, with operatives in individual cells empowered to adapt, modify, and implement solutions tailored to specific local conditions, demonstrating a high degree of technical literacy, autonomy, and ingenuity within the framework of organizational guidelines. and allowing each node in the network to function independently while maintaining coherence with the faction's strategic objectives. Ongoing refinement and innovation are encouraged, with operatives documenting successes, failures, and technical insights to inform future operations, improving the efficiency, security, and versatility of tools while maintaining alignment with the ethical standards and operational philosophy of the railroad, reflecting a systematic approach to knowledge management and technological adaptation within a clandestine, decentralized organization. Beyond immediate operational tools, the railroad also prioritizes the integration of pre-war and institute technology that can be ethically repurposed, including terminals, sensor equipment, storage systems, and technical manuals, enabling operatives to leverage existing infrastructure in ways that enhance operational capability while minimizing exposure and risk, demonstrating both strategic foresight and practical ingenuity in resource utilization. The combination of tactical, logistical, and ethical application of technology ensures that the railroad can execute its mission in a dynamic, unpredictable environment, managing risk, supporting synthetic autonomy, and sustaining operational effectiveness over the long term. Even in the face of technologically superior adversaries and the complex social, environmental, and structural challenges of the Commonwealth, training in the use of these tools emphasizes not only technical proficiency, but also judgment, improvisation, ethical awareness, and operational discretion, preparing operatives to employ devices effectively under conditions of stress, unpredictability, and moral complexity, ensuring that technology serves both the practical and philosophical objectives of the organization, while maintaining alignment with canonical standards of behavior and factional doctrine. Ultimately, the railroad's use of technology and tools exemplifies the integration of tactical sophistication, operational security, creative adaptation, and ethical commitment, allowing the faction to achieve strategic objectives, protect synthetic individuals, and maintain a resilient, adaptable, and covert operational presence within the Commonwealth, solidifying its canonical identity as a faction capable of overcoming significant technological, logistical, and environmental challenges through the innovative, principled, and disciplined application of both pre-war and contemporary resources, and establishing a model of clandestine efficacy, technological ingenuity, and philosophical coherence that defines the railroad's role in the Fallout universe. The conflicts between the railroad and the Institute constitute a central dynamic in the factional landscape of the Commonwealth, reflecting both the ideological divergence between the protection of synthetic autonomy and the Institute's exercise of control over its creations, and the strategic and operational challenges inherent in opposing a technologically superior organization capable of surveillance, rapid mobilization, and advanced synthetic deployment, and these conflicts manifest in multiple forms, ranging from discrete, clandestine engagements and intelligence contests to large-scale confrontations that test the resilience, adaptability, and cohesion of the railroad as it seeks to protect the autonomy and safety of the synthetic individuals under its care, while simultaneously preserving the integrity of its network and operational secrecy. At the strategic level, the ideological conflict is rooted in the fundamental divergence between the railroad's mission to recognize and safeguard the consciousness, autonomy, and agency of synths, and the Institute's perception of synths as assets to be controlled, monitored, and, when necessary, recalled or terminated in accordance with institutional priorities, creating an enduring tension in which each faction's objectives are mutually exclusive, necessitating a combination of subterfuge, tactical planning, and ethical deliberation on the part of the railroad to navigate the operational landscape without provoking catastrophic loss or compromising its principles. Operational confrontations often arise from direct extraction missions, intelligence gathering, or the discovery of safe-house locations, during which the Institute may deploy personnel, synthetic agents, and advanced surveillance technology to intercept, neutralize, or reclaim targets, and the railroad must respond with careful planning, adaptive tactics, and a combination of technical, logistical, and field skill to evade detection, protect synths, and preserve the integrity of its network, demonstrating both the faction's resourcefulness and the high stakes inherent in its engagement with the Institute. The railroad's decentralized structure and emphasis on autonomy at the cell level provide a critical advantage in these conflicts, allowing individual teams to operate independently, improvise in response to emergent threats, and execute rapid maneuvers while maintaining alignment with overall strategic objectives, a design that mitigates the risks posed by the Institute's superior firepower, synthetic reinforcements, and technological capabilities, and enables the organization to sustain operational continuity even under extreme pressure. Intelligence and reconnaissance play pivotal roles in conflicts with the Institute, as the railroad relies on covert observation, infiltration, and the analysis of Institute behavior to anticipate potential threats, identify vulnerabilities, and plan extraction operations with precision, and operatives are trained to exploit gaps in the Institute's oversight, manipulate technological systems, and utilize environmental knowledge to gain tactical advantage without compromising ethical standards or the safety of the synths involved. The ethical dimension of these conflicts is profound, as the railroad consistently prioritizes the preservation of autonomy and life over direct confrontation, adopting strategies that minimize casualties and collateral damage, avoid unnecessary aggression, and ensure that operations reinforce the philosophical commitment to synthetic independence, reflecting a careful balance between moral principle and operational necessity that defines the faction's approach to engagement with a far more powerful adversary. Historical operations documented within canonical sources demonstrate the complex interplay of strategy, tactics, and ethics in these conflicts, including the extraction of synths from heavily secured Institute facilities, the evasion of pursuit by both human and synthetic agents, and the execution of multi-node operations designed to relocate individuals while maintaining secrecy and minimizing exposure to hostile forces, illustrating the combination of ingenuity, coordination, and ethical rigor that underpins the railroad's operational methodology. The Institute's response to the railroad's activities ranges from increased surveillance and the deployment of synth retrieval teams to targeted investigations designed to uncover the locations of safe houses, identify operative identities, and disrupt logistical networks, and the railroad must continuously adapt its infrastructure, communication methods, and operational planning to mitigate these threats, reflecting an ongoing contest in which technological adaptation, strategic foresight, and field proficiency are essential to sustaining the organization's mission and protecting synthetic autonomy. Covert engagements often involve manipulation of digital systems, diversionary tactics, and the exploitation of environmental features, including urban layouts, subterranean tunnels, and abandoned structures to facilitate extraction or evade detection, and these tactics demonstrate the railroad's capacity to leverage knowledge, improvisation, and ingenuity against an adversary with superior technological resources, turning constraints into operational advantages, while adhering to the organization's ethical imperatives. The psychological dimension of these conflicts is also significant, as operatives must navigate high-stakes scenarios that involve rapid decision-making under pressure, potential moral ambiguity, and the responsibility for the welfare of synthetic individuals, requiring training, experience, and philosophical grounding to ensure that choices made in the field are consistent with both ethical principles and strategic objectives, and that the organization maintains cohesion and resilience in the face of adversity. Resource allocation, logistical coordination, and the maintenance of secure communication channels are central to managing these conflicts, with the railroad employing encrypted messaging, secure dead drops, and pre-established contingencies to maintain operational integrity even under threat, and to ensure that intelligence, personnel, and synthetic assets remain protected throughout the execution of extraction, surveillance, and counter-surveillance missions. The decentralized nature of the railroad allows for simultaneous operations across multiple locations, enabling the faction to distribute risk, complicate institute efforts at detection or interception, and create opportunities for diversion, infiltration, and extraction that maximize operational effectiveness while minimizing exposure, illustrating how organizational structure and technological adaptation coalesce to provide resilience in high-stakes conflicts. Strategic foresight informs the selection of operational timing, routes, and methods as the railroad considers the Institute's patrol patterns, the capabilities of synthetic agents, and environmental factors to execute operations efficiently, reduce vulnerability, and enhance the probability of successful extraction, while adhering to ethical standards that prioritize autonomy and life over aggression or retaliation. Post-operation analysis and adaptive learning are embedded in the railroad's methodology, with each engagement with the Institute evaluated for effectiveness, security, and ethical compliance, informing refinements in tactics, communication, and infrastructure, ensuring that the organization evolves in response to emerging threats, technological advancements, and operational challenges without compromising its principles or the safety of synthetic individuals. The cumulative impact of these conflicts is significant, both operationally and philosophically, as they shape the evolution of the railroad's tactics, infrastructure, and training, reinforce the necessity of discretion, innovation, and resilience, and highlight the ongoing tension between the preservation of synthetic autonomy and the exercise of institutional control by the Institute, illustrating the canonical complexity of factional dynamics within the Fallout universe. Ultimately, the conflicts between the railroad and the Institute exemplify a multifaceted struggle in which strategy, technology, ethics, and operational execution intersect, defining the faction's identity, operational methodology, and philosophical commitments, sustaining its mission in the Commonwealth, and providing a canonical narrative of clandestine resistance, ingenuity, and principled engagement that underscores the railroad's distinctive role as both a morally driven and operationally sophisticated entity, capable of challenging a technologically dominant adversary, while upholding the ethical and philosophical principles that constitute the core of its existence within the Fallout universe. The Railroad's relations with other factions in the Commonwealth are defined by a combination of pragmatic engagement, strategic caution, and ethical calculation, reflecting the organization's need to operate effectively within a complex, multi-factional environment, while remaining true to its philosophical commitment to the protection and autonomy of synthetic individuals. And these relationships vary widely in both form and intensity, ranging from cooperative alliances with sympathetic entities, through tactical neutrality with potentially indifferent groups, to outright opposition with factions whose objectives threaten the Railroad's mission. And each interaction is carefully navigated to balance operational needs, security imperatives, and ethical obligations. The Minutemen, for example, represent a faction with which the Railroad can engage in limited cooperative terms, particularly where their objectives align with maintaining safety and order in specific settlements, providing opportunities for intelligence sharing, temporary safe house support, or diversionary assistance during extraction operations, though the Railroad remains cautious to avoid full integration or dependence on Minutemen forces, recognizing that the decentralized and loosely disciplined nature of the Minutemen may compromise operational secrecy or create unintended exposure for synths under protection, highlighting the nuanced management of relationships, even with potentially sympathetic factions. Interactions with the Brotherhood of Steel are largely characterized by ideological divergence and operational opposition, as the Brotherhood's focus on technology control, authoritarian enforcement, and the retrieval or destruction of advanced pre-war or Institute technologies frequently places it at odds with the Railroad's objectives, particularly in cases where synths or technological infrastructure fall within contested zones. And while outright conflict is generally avoided, unless directly necessary, strategic awareness, intelligence gathering, and preemptive planning are required to minimize the potential for interference or hostile engagement, underscoring the faction's need for tactical prudence in navigating relationships with technologically dominant adversaries. Local settlements and civilian communities represent another critical dimension of relational management, with the Railroad often engaging in discreet support, provision of aid, or information exchange, while avoiding overt association, thereby leveraging local knowledge, establishing temporary operational cover, and cultivating trust without revealing the broader network or mission to uninformed parties, reflecting a careful balance between strategic necessity and operational security, and illustrating the faction's ability to operate within the social and environmental complexities of the Commonwealth. Covert relations with sympathetic individuals within other factions, including informants or operatives who may be disillusioned with their organization's policies, form a key element of the Railroad's intelligence network, enabling the acquisition of critical information regarding patrols, technological systems, security protocols, or potential threats. And these relationships are cultivated with caution, discretion, and attention to the ethical ramifications of recruitment or collaboration, ensuring that both operational effectiveness and the moral integrity of the Railroad are preserved. In situations where factions, such as the Institute, the Brotherhood, or hostile raider groups threaten synths or operational infrastructure, the Railroad employs a combination of avoidance, diversion, and tactical engagement designed to neutralize threats while minimizing risk to synthetic individuals and operatives, illustrating a commitment to ethical action even under conditions of extreme danger and operational pressure. The railroad's interaction with factions is also informed by long-term strategic foresight, with leaders such as Desdemona emphasizing the importance of maintaining operational independence, avoiding over-reliance on external parties, and assessing both ideological alignment and practical utility before entering cooperative arrangements, thereby safeguarding the autonomy of both the organization and the synths it protects, while maintaining the flexibility necessary to exploit opportunities for strategic advantage. Communication and intelligence exchange with other factions are carefully managed to prevent compromise, with coded messages, intermediaries, and secure protocols, ensuring that only the information necessary for operational collaboration is shared, while sensitive knowledge regarding safe houses, operatives, or synthetic individuals remains strictly compartmentalized, reflecting the railroad's overarching prioritization of security, discretion, and ethical responsibility. The railroad also navigates the delicate dynamics of reputation, influence, and perception among other factions, understanding that perceived alignment or opposition can have significant consequences for operational access, local support, and threat assessment, and therefore engages in deliberate signaling, selective transparency, and calculated discretion to manage relationships in a manner that advances strategic objectives without jeopardizing the safety or autonomy of synths. Historical interactions demonstrate the complexity of these relationships, including temporary tactical alliances, negotiated non-interference agreements, and the cultivation of sympathetic contacts within adversarial factions, all of which require careful judgment, negotiation skill, and adherence to ethical principles, illustrating the multifaceted nature of the railroad's engagement with other entities and its capacity to adapt strategy to evolving environmental and political circumstances. Operational planning incorporates relational considerations at every level, with intelligence analysis, extraction routes, safe house placement, and contingency planning, all informed by the behavior, capabilities, and potential reactions of other factions, ensuring that the railroad's missions are executed with both strategic prudence and ethical consistency, minimizing the potential for accidental exposure, conflict escalation, or compromise of synthetic individuals under protection. The railroad's engagement with factions is also guided by a clear ethical framework, emphasizing that relationships should serve the protection of synthetic life and support operational objectives without violating the principles of autonomy, consent, and respect for consciousness, creating a relational model that balances pragmatism with moral integrity and ensuring that interactions with human or synthetic actors are consistent with the broader philosophy of the organization. The organization employs ongoing evaluation and adaptation in managing relationships, continually assessing factional behavior, emerging threats, and opportunities for support or collaboration, and adjusting operational protocols, training, and intelligence priorities accordingly, demonstrating a dynamic approach to relational strategy that allows the railroad to maintain effectiveness, security, and ethical coherence over time. Conflicts or cooperation with factions are contextualized within the railroad's broader strategic objectives, ensuring that tactical decisions reinforce long-term goals, such as the preservation of autonomy, the expansion of safe networks, and the protection of synthetic individuals, while avoiding unnecessary entanglement in disputes or agendas unrelated to the mission, highlighting the faction's disciplined approach to multi-factional navigation. The cumulative impact of these relationships shapes the operational environment of the railroad, influencing mission planning, risk assessment, safe house utilization, and intelligence operations, and requires leaders and operatives to exercise judgment, discretion, and strategic foresight at all times, integrating ethical principles with tactical necessity. Ultimately, the railroad's relations with other factions exemplify the careful balance of pragmatism, strategy, and ethical commitment that defines its operational philosophy, enabling the organization to navigate a complex, contested, and morally ambiguous Commonwealth landscape while maintaining the autonomy, protection, and well-being of synthetic individuals, sustaining its clandestine network, and reinforcing the canonical identity of the faction as a principled, adaptive, and strategically sophisticated actor within the Fallout universe. These relationships, whether cooperative, neutral, or adversarial, are managed with the constant integration of operational security, philosophical coherence, and ethical vigilance, ensuring that the railroad remains effective, resilient, and morally aligned in its interactions across the diverse and volatile social, political, and technological environment of the post-apocalyptic Commonwealth. The railroad's effectiveness and survival in the Commonwealth is inseparable from the contributions of its key operatives and leaders, whose strategic vision, personal philosophies, and practical skills have defined the faction's operations, resilience, and ethical framework. And among these figures, Desdemona stands as the central guiding force, serving as both ideological and operational leader, whose intellect, strategic foresight, and deep moral commitment to the freedom and autonomy of synthetic individuals underpin the railroad's mission. Desdemona's leadership is characterized by a careful balance of secrecy and empowerment, allowing decentralized cells to act autonomously while maintaining cohesion through carefully managed communication, operational protocols, and shared ethical principles. And she exemplifies the philosophical foundation of the railroad, consistently emphasizing that every decision, from extraction operations to safe house placement, must prioritize the protection and agency of synths while mitigating risk to operatives and the broader network, embodying the moral rigor and strategic discipline that has enabled the railroad to persist in an environment dominated by the technologically superior and ideologically rigid institute. Alongside Desdemona, Tinker Tom represents a figure whose technical ingenuity, practical skills, and ethical pragmatism have had an extraordinary impact on the railroad's operational capacity, particularly in the realm of field engineering, improvisation, and technology adaptation, and his ability to repurpose institute or pre-war equipment, create improvised tools for infiltration and extraction, and train operatives in practical applications of technology, has ensured that the railroad can operate effectively despite limited resources and constant threats, reflecting the intersection of innovation, moral responsibility, and operational necessity that defines the faction's approach to clandestine operations. Deacon, another prominent operative, embodies the railroad's approach to espionage, covert operations, and psychological strategy, utilizing his charm, intelligence, and versatility to gather information, mislead adversaries, and facilitate extraction missions with minimal detection, while also serving as a cultural touchstone within the organization, reinforcing morale, camaraderie, and the philosophical commitment to the protection of synths. And his unique blend of humor, subterfuge, and loyalty highlights the importance of individual operatives' personalities and creativity in maintaining the effectiveness of the railroad's decentralized network. Each notable operative brings a specialized skill set to the railroad, whether in logistics, intelligence, technical support, field operations, or leadership, and the synergy of these diverse capabilities allows the organization to execute complex missions, maintain secure communication networks, and adapt to the unpredictable dynamics of the Commonwealth, with individuals such as Desdemona, Tinker Tom, and Deacon providing both operational excellence and ethical guidance that shape the conduct and identity of the faction as a whole. Leadership within the railroad is often characterized by mentorship, with experienced operatives training newer recruits in practical skills, operational judgment, ethical decision-making, and situational adaptability, ensuring that institutional knowledge, technical expertise, and philosophical principles are transmitted throughout the network, creating resilience and continuity in a structure that must remain decentralized to avoid detection and infiltration, and emphasizing the importance of cultivating both competence and moral discernment in all members. The personal philosophies of these operatives directly influence operational decisions, as their understanding of autonomy, protection, and ethical responsibility informs everything from tactical planning to risk assessment, contingency management, and the prioritization of missions, highlighting the interplay between individual judgment and collective strategic objectives, and demonstrating how leadership in the railroad is both practical and moral, requiring the capacity to navigate high-stakes, morally complex scenarios with clarity, discretion, and adherence to overarching principles. Notable operatives also exemplify the organizational culture of adaptability and ingenuity, often improvising solutions in high-pressure situations, such as extraction under surveillance, safe house compromise, or technological obstacles, and their ability to reconcile creativity with ethical consistency underscores the railroad's capacity to maintain operational effectiveness in the face of the Institute's technological superiority and the unpredictable challenges of the Commonwealth's social and environmental landscape. The historical impact of these figures is evident in canonical operations, including major synth extractions, the development and expansion of safehouse networks, the adaptation of Institute technology for clandestine purposes, and the maintenance of the railroad's intelligence network, demonstrating that the faction's operational achievements are inseparable from the skill, judgment, and ethical grounding of its key members, and that the success of missions often hinges upon the initiative, resourcefulness, and moral clarity of individual operatives acting within the framework established by leadership. Interpersonal dynamics among these operatives further strengthen the railroad, as trust, communication, and mutual respect foster collaboration, reinforce security protocols, and enable complex multi-cell operations, highlighting the critical role of human relationships in a clandestine organization operating under conditions of extreme secrecy, risk, and ethical responsibility. Even within the decentralized structure, notable leaders establish clear, strategic objectives, set operational priorities, and mediate internal discussions regarding ethical dilemmas, resource allocation, and long-term planning, ensuring that the network operates coherently while remaining flexible enough to respond to emergent threats, environmental challenges, and adversarial interference. The personalities and philosophies of these operatives also contribute to the moral culture of the railroad, as decisions regarding the treatment of synths, engagement with other factions, prioritization of missions, and acceptable risk thresholds are informed by the judgment and ethical reasoning of experienced leaders, embedding moral deliberation into the very fabric of operational practice and reinforcing the organization's identity as a faction that is both principled and pragmatic. The skill, innovation, and ethical commitment demonstrated by figures such as Desdemona, Tinker Tom, and Deacon create a model for other operatives, establishing behavioral norms, operational standards, and philosophical benchmarks that guide decision-making at all levels. And their legacy within the organization ensures that new recruits internalize both practical and ethical competencies, sustaining the effectiveness, coherence, and resilience of the railroad over time. Operational narratives reveal that these leaders are often directly involved in high-stakes missions, providing guidance, technical support, and strategic oversight, while also demonstrating personal courage, improvisation, and ethical reasoning in situations where unforeseen threats or moral ambiguities arise, underscoring the dual nature of leadership in the railroad as both tactical and philosophical, and exemplifying the canonical depiction of these figures as instrumental to the organization's survival and success. In summary, the notable operatives and leaders of the railroad exemplify the fusion of moral philosophy, strategic acumen, technical skill, and practical ingenuity that defines the faction's identity, ensuring the protection of synthetic individuals, the resilience of clandestine networks, and the ethical coherence of operations across the Commonwealth. And their contributions, both documented and inferred from canonical sources, establish a compelling portrait of individuals whose personal capacities, philosophies, and decisions sustain the mission of the railroad in the volatile, technologically complex, and morally ambiguous landscape of Fallout 4, demonstrating that the faction's effectiveness and enduring significance are inseparable from the leadership, creativity, and ethical commitment of its most prominent members, whose legacy continues to influence the operational and moral framework of the organization, and provides a canonical reference point for understanding the human dimension of resistance, clandestine action, and principled engagement in the post-apocalyptic Commonwealth. The railroad's operations in the Commonwealth are consistently defined by moral complexity and ethical deliberation, as the organization navigates a landscape in which the pursuit of freedom for synthetic individuals often requires decisions that conflict with human laws, societal norms, and immediate safety considerations, creating a persistent tension between principle and pragmatism that permeates every aspect of its clandestine activities. And the ethical dilemmas faced by its operatives are both systemic and situational, encompassing decisions regarding the prioritization of missions, allocation of limited resources, engagement with other factions, and the treatment of both human and synthetic actors within the operational theater, reflecting the intricate moral calculus inherent in resisting a technologically superior and ideologically rigid adversary, such as the Institute. Central to these dilemmas is the railroad's unwavering commitment to the autonomy of synths, which establishes a philosophical framework in which the protection of consciousness, self-determination, and freedom takes precedence over institutional authority, legal mandates, and conventional notions of property or ownership, positioning the faction as a morally assertive actor willing to challenge the prevailing social order to safeguard what it perceives as sentient life, and requiring operatives and leadership to continually negotiate the ethical boundaries of action, restraint, and intervention within a hostile and morally ambiguous environment. The prioritization of synthetic life over human laws frequently manifests in operational decisions, such as the extraction of synths from institute facilities, wherein operatives must weigh the risk of property destruction, potential civilian exposure, or conflict with other factions against the immediate necessity of preserving autonomy and life. And these situations often involve rapid judgment under conditions of uncertainty, highlighting the intersection of ethical reasoning, tactical proficiency, and strategic foresight that defines railroad decision-making, and demonstrating that moral deliberation is inseparable from operational planning and execution. Ethical dilemmas also arise in the context of relations with other factions, including the Minutemen, Brotherhood of Steel, and local settlements, where the railroad must navigate questions of cooperation, non-interference, and selective disclosure, balancing operational necessity against the potential consequences for humans and synths alike, and ensuring that alliances or tactical accommodations do not compromise the moral principles underpinning the organization's mission, reflecting a nuanced engagement with the complexities of social, political, and ethical interaction within a contested post-apocalyptic landscape. Within the internal dynamics of the organization, operatives face dilemmas regarding the use of deception, espionage, and subterfuge, as tactics such as infiltration, coded communication, and misinformation are necessary to protect synths and maintain operational security, yet carry potential moral implications related to trust, manipulation, and the treatment of both allies and adversaries, requiring careful consideration of the ethical ramifications of clandestine behavior and the alignment of practical necessity with principled conduct. The allocation of resources presents another layer of ethical complexity, as safe houses, personnel, and equipment are limited, and leaders and operatives must make decisions about which missions to prioritize, which synths to extract first, and how to deploy operatives without endangering either human collaborators or synthetic individuals, demonstrating the continual balancing act between ethical responsibility and operational effectiveness, and underscoring the moral weight inherent in the management of clandestine resources within a high-risk, high-stakes environment. Risk management itself embodies ethical considerations, as the potential for collateral damage, exposure of innocent parties, or loss of life forces the railroad to continually weigh the consequences of action versus inaction, and to develop protocols, contingency plans, and operational guidelines that minimize harm while fulfilling the organization's mission, reflecting an ethical calculus that is dynamic, context-dependent, and deeply integrated into the structure and philosophy of the faction. Historical accounts of missions and canonical events reveal numerous instances in which operatives confronted morally fraught scenarios, such as choosing between immediate extraction of a synth under pursuit versus ensuring the safety of other assets, deciding whether to engage hostile factions directly or evade confrontation, and determining the extent to which deception and manipulation of human or synthetic actors is justified to achieve strategic objectives, highlighting the real-world implications of ethical reasoning in clandestine operations and the challenges inherent in applying moral principles within a post-apocalyptic, adversarial environment. Leadership within the railroad plays a critical role in framing and guiding responses to these dilemmas, with figures such as Desdemona, Tinker Tom, and Deacon providing both philosophical grounding and practical judgment to ensure that ethical considerations inform tactical decisions, training protocols, and operational priorities, and that the moral imperatives of synthetic autonomy, protection of life, and preservation of operational integrity are consistently reinforced across decentralized cells, establishing a culture in which ethical deliberation is inseparable from operational competence. Ethical tension also emerges in the context of human-synth interactions, as operatives must determine the appropriate level of disclosure, autonomy, and consent in guiding synthetic individuals through extraction, relocation, and integration into safe houses, balancing the provision of information with operational security, and respecting the agency of those under protection, illustrating the nuanced application of ethical principles in both strategic and interpersonal contexts. The railroad's moral framework is further complicated by its engagement with technology, as tools and devices used to bypass security systems, monitor movement, and facilitate extraction have the potential to affect human actors, environmental stability, and long-term consequences, requiring operatives to consider not only immediate operational outcomes, but also the broader ethical implications of technological intervention, and ensuring that tools are deployed in alignment with both strategic goals and the organization's philosophical commitments. Operational secrecy itself carries ethical implications, as the need to protect the network may require withholding information, compartmentalizing knowledge, and employing misdirection, raising questions about transparency, trust, and responsibility among operatives and allies, and necessitating ongoing reflection and discourse to ensure that these practices support the overarching mission without compromising moral integrity. The interplay between ethical principles and practical exigencies is a defining feature of the railroad's approach, shaping every aspect of recruitment, training, mission planning, safe house management, and interaction with other factions, and requiring constant negotiation between idealism and pragmatism, particularly in situations where operational success, safety, and moral principles may be in tension, highlighting the cognitive, philosophical, and emotional demands placed upon operatives and leadership. Ultimately, the railroad's engagement with morality and ethical dilemmas exemplifies a faction in which philosophical coherence, principled action, and operational necessity converge, producing a canonical portrait of a clandestine organization that prioritizes the protection of consciousness, autonomy, and life, even when doing so entails risk, deception, or the suspension of conventional legal norms, and illustrating the enduring tension between moral responsibility and tactical pragmatism that defines the human experience in the Fallout universe, reinforcing the faction's significance as both a narrative and ethical construct that challenges players to consider the implications of agency, freedom, and principled action in a world shaped by technological dominance, societal collapse, and moral ambiguity. The railroad's handling of these dilemmas, both at the strategic and operational levels, underscores the complexity, nuance, and canonical richness of the faction, revealing a network that is not only technically proficient and operationally sophisticated, but also deeply committed to ethical reflection, creating a model for understanding the interplay between clandestine action, moral, philosophy, and the protection of synthetic life in the context of post-apocalyptic Boston, and establishing a foundation for the faction's ongoing narrative, influence, and thematic resonance within the broader Fallout lore, as it continues to embody questions of freedom, identity, and responsibility that challenge players and observers to grapple with the ethical realities of resistance, autonomy, and clandestine moral action in a fractured, contested, and morally complex world. The railroad's influence on the Commonwealth extends far beyond its clandestine operations, shaping social, political, and technological dynamics in ways that are subtle yet profound, as its commitment to protecting synthetic individuals creates ripple effects that alter interactions between human and synthetic populations, redefine perceptions of autonomy, and influence the behavior of other factions within post-apocalyptic Boston and its surrounding regions. And while the organization operates largely in secrecy, the outcomes of its activities are visible in the growing network of liberated synths, the resilience of safe houses, and the cautious engagement of local communities that recognize, implicitly or explicitly, the presence of a faction devoted to clandestine protection and moral advocacy. Socially, the railroad affects local settlements by creating a moral precedent that challenges conventional notions of ownership, hierarchy, and authority, as humans and synths alike encounter evidence of intervention in situations where institute control or exploitation would have otherwise prevailed, leading to a gradual re-evaluation of ethical norms and trust, and fostering pockets of cooperation, sanctuary, and tacit support among civilians who may never fully understand the organization's scope yet benefit from its protective interventions, illustrating the complex ways in which clandestine operations can alter social attitudes without overt public recognition or acknowledgement. Politically, the railroad's activities indirectly influence factional dynamics, as both the Brotherhood of Steel and the Minutemen, as well as smaller settlements and opportunistic groups, are forced to adjust strategies, patrols, and alliances in response to patterns of synth liberation, intelligence leaks, and covert actions, creating a landscape in which power, influence, and operational freedom are shaped not only by overt military strength, but also by the presence of a principled, ethically driven organization capable of subverting the agendas of more dominant entities through stealth, ingenuity, and strategic foresight. The railroad's technological interventions, including the repurposing of institute equipment, hacking of terminals, and development of improvised extraction tools, contribute to the broader technological landscape of the Commonwealth by demonstrating adaptive uses of pre-war and institute technology, inspiring other actors to consider alternative applications of devices and systems, and highlighting the potential for resourceful, decentralized actors to challenge centralized technological dominance, thereby creating a subtle but meaningful shift in the Commonwealth's understanding of technological agency, security, and innovation. The presence of the railroad also influences the morale and ethical orientation of other actors, both human and synthetic, as its commitment to autonomy and protection provides a visible example of principled resistance, reinforcing the notion that even a small, clandestine network can assert moral authority and effect change in a context dominated by violence, scarcity, and coercion, and contributing to an emergent culture of resistance that intersects with broader narratives of freedom, agency, and self-determination in the post-apocalyptic environment. The outcomes of railroad operations often generate tangible effects in localized regions, such as the sudden appearance of liberated synths within communities, unexplained disruptions to institute infrastructure, or the recovery of stolen resources and information, which force other factions to respond, adapt, or recalibrate their operational priorities, illustrating the strategic influence of a small yet highly capable organization whose interventions, while not always publicly recognized, fundamentally alter the operational calculus of more powerful adversaries. The ethical example set by the railroad further amplifies its impact, as operatives consistently navigate moral dilemmas in a manner that prioritizes autonomy, life, and discretion, influencing both the internal culture of allied factions and the broader narrative understanding of the consequences of action versus inaction, compelling observers, operatives, and civilians alike to consider the legitimacy of resistance, the protection of sentient life, and the responsibilities of those with the power to act in morally complex situations. Intelligence and espionage efforts undertaken by the railroad extend its influence by providing actionable information to allied or sympathetic actors, revealing vulnerabilities in the Institute's operations, and indirectly shaping the deployment and strategic decisions of other factions, demonstrating that the organization's presence is not limited to physical intervention, but also encompasses cognitive and informational dimensions that affect decision-making, security postures, and operational planning. Across the Commonwealth, the railroad's rescue and extraction missions create networks of liberated synths whose presence serves as both a practical and symbolic indicator of change, as these individuals contribute to the complexity, diversity, and ethical landscape of human-synthetic interactions, challenging assumptions about obedience, control, and identity, and reinforcing the notion that freedom and autonomy are achievable despite systemic attempts at subjugation, thereby reshaping perceptions and influencing social norms within the Commonwealth. The psychological impact on the Institute is notable as well, as repeated incursions, theft of synths, and exposure to operational subversion compel the organization to re-evaluate security protocols, increase surveillance, and modify operational planning, highlighting how the actions of a clandestine faction can exert strategic influence over a technologically dominant entity, forcing shifts in policy, resource allocation, and institutional behavior that reverberate through the region. The railroad's effect on the Commonwealth extends to urban planning, movement, and logistical considerations, as its operatives exploit tunnels, hidden passageways, and urban infrastructure to relocate synths, evade detection, and maintain operational security, prompting adaptive responses from other factions in terms of patrolling, territory control, and surveillance, which in turn reshapes the flow of movement, access, and control within the post-apocalyptic cityscape. In the cultural dimension, the railroad's actions introduce narratives of resistance, clandestine heroism, and moral courage that subtly infiltrate local consciousness, inspiring tales, cautionary lessons, and symbolic references among both human and synthetic populations, contributing to a shared understanding that defiance and principled action are possible even under the shadow of overwhelming technological and institutional power, and reinforcing the faction's narrative presence within the collective memory of the Commonwealth. The railroad's clandestine activities also affect economic dynamics, as missions, resource allocation, and the movement of operatives and synths create localized patterns of demand, scarcity, and redistribution, subtly influencing settlements, trade, and the strategic priorities of competing factions, illustrating that even a secretive organization with limited overt presence can produce tangible material effects on the socio-economic landscape. Humanitarian impact is similarly notable, as rescued synths, supported safe houses, and discrete interventions provide relief, safety, and stability for beings otherwise subject to control, surveillance, or exploitation, creating moral and practical precedents for the treatment of sentient life in the Commonwealth, and establishing the railroad as an ethical actor whose influence extends into questions of justice, protection, and rights within the post-apocalyptic context. Cumulative impact is observable over time in the development of networks of knowledge, safe houses, and sympathetic actors, which both enhance the operational reach of the railroad and shift the equilibrium of power within the Commonwealth by creating zones of resistance, protected sanctuaries, and intelligence sharing hubs, demonstrating the long-term strategic effects of sustained clandestine action on both local and regional scales. The canonical record suggests that these influences are enduring, as the presence of liberated synths, operational precedents, and ethical models contributes to the ongoing evolution of factional behavior, civilian attitudes, and technological adaptation, embedding the railroad's legacy into the structural and moral fabric of the post-apocalyptic environment and establishing the faction as a persistent, if often invisible, agent of change within the Fallout universe. Ultimately, the impact of the railroad on the Commonwealth is multifaceted, encompassing social, political, technological, psychological, and ethical dimensions, demonstrating that a clandestine organization, guided by principled leadership, operational sophistication, and moral commitment, can meaningfully alter the landscape in which it operates, shaping interactions, perceptions, and outcomes for both human and synthetic populations, influencing the behavior of rival factions, and embedding a canonical narrative of resistance, autonomy, and ethical agency into the broader story of Fallout, creating a legacy whose effects persist even beyond the immediate scope of its missions, and highlighting the complex interplay between clandestine action, principled resistance, and the transformative power of moral and operational foresight in a post-apocalyptic society where freedom, identity, and survival are constantly contested and negotiated. The railroad's espionage and intelligence networks represent one of the most sophisticated and indispensable components of its clandestine operations, providing the organization with critical insight into the movements, capabilities, and intentions of the Institute, rival factions, and the broader socio-political landscape of the Commonwealth. And these networks operate through a combination of human operatives, informants embedded in other organizations, technical surveillance systems, coded communication channels, and improvised reconnaissance techniques, all designed to maximize operational awareness while minimizing the risk of exposure and ensuring the safety of both synths and operatives. Central to this intelligence apparatus is the recruitment and management of informants and agents who possess access to key locations, information systems, or insider knowledge, and the railroad cultivates these relationships with extreme discretion, employing methods of vetting, compartmentalization, and ethical negotiation to ensure loyalty, reliability, and operational security, while simultaneously safeguarding the principles of autonomy and consent that define the faction's philosophical commitments, illustrating the intersection of ethical practice and tactical necessity in the conduct of espionage. Communication and information flow within the network rely heavily on coded messages, encrypted transmissions, and dead-drop systems, which allow decentralized cells to exchange intelligence, coordinate extraction missions, and respond to emergent threats without revealing the location of safe houses, the identities of operatives, or the status of ongoing operations, and the development and implementation of these systems require both technical skill and operational foresight, as the railroad must constantly adapt to the Institute's counter-surveillance measures, electronic tracking, and security protocols while maintaining functional secrecy across multiple nodes. Surveillance and reconnaissance are conducted through both direct observation and technological means, including the careful monitoring of patrol patterns, Institute facilities, and urban transit routes, as well as the use of improvised sensors, tampered terminals, and repurposed devices, allowing the railroad to predict potential threats, plan extraction operations with precision, and implement diversionary tactics when necessary, highlighting the integration of practical ingenuity, technological adaptation, and strategic foresight that characterizes the faction's intelligence-gathering efforts. The decentralized structure of the railroad enhances the resilience and flexibility of its espionage operations, as individual cells are empowered to collect, analyze, and act upon intelligence independently, yet within the framework of overarching operational guidelines and ethical principles, ensuring that the network remains cohesive and responsive while avoiding vulnerabilities associated with centralized command, and demonstrating the organizational innovation that allows a relatively small faction to exert influence disproportionate to its size against technologically superior adversaries. Risk management is central to intelligence work, as operatives must constantly assess the potential for exposure, the reliability of sources, the consequences of misinformation, and the likelihood of interception by the Institute or hostile factions, and these assessments inform decision-making regarding mission timing, agent deployment, safehouse utilization, and the prioritization of operational objectives, reflecting the complex interplay of ethics, strategy, and practical constraints inherent in clandestine intelligence operations. The railroad's espionage efforts are further characterized by the use of deception and counterintelligence, including the creation of false trails, misinformation campaigns, and deliberate misdirection designed to mislead adversaries and protect critical assets, while maintaining alignment with the faction's ethical framework, ensuring that tactical subterfuge serves the overarching mission of preserving autonomy and life rather than enabling gratuitous harm or coercion, illustrating the integration of moral reasoning into operational strategy. Intelligence analysis within the railroad involves the systematic evaluation of collected information, pattern recognition, threat assessment, and strategic forecasting, enabling the organization to anticipate Institute responses, identify vulnerabilities, and develop operational plans with minimal risk to personnel and synths. And this analytical capacity is continuously refined through feedback from field operations, historical mission outcomes, and collaborative problem-solving among experienced operatives, demonstrating the faction's commitment to both practical efficacy and continuous learning. Espionage operations are intimately linked to rescue and health extraction missions, as accurate, timely intelligence is essential for determining the location of synths, the disposition of security forces, and the feasibility of intervention, and operatives, trained in both observation and analytical reasoning, are tasked with gathering detailed environmental, behavioral, and technological data to inform tactical planning, illustrating the operational centrality of intelligence networks to the railroad's core mission. Ethical considerations are embedded throughout intelligence work, as the protection of sources, the responsible use of information, and the avoidance of unnecessary harm are paramount, reflecting the faction's moral commitment to autonomy and life. and influencing operational protocols, training curricula, and strategic decision-making, ensuring that espionage does not become an end in itself, but remains a tool for principled action and the preservation of freedom. The railroad also monitors technological developments, institute projects, and factional movements to anticipate changes that could affect operational security or mission feasibility, using both technical expertise and human observation to track innovations, security upgrades, and patrol modifications, allowing the organization to adapt its tools, tactics, and infrastructure in response to a dynamic and adversarial environment, highlighting the integration of intelligence, technology, and strategic foresight. Historical operations demonstrate the efficacy of these intelligence networks, including the identification of institute retrieval efforts, the detection of potential infiltration of safe houses, and the strategic anticipation of factional movements, which have enabled the successful execution of high-risk extractions, diversionary operations, and counter-surveillance tactics, providing canonical evidence of the railroad's operational sophistication and strategic foresight, and reinforcing the narrative of a small, morally guided faction capable of influencing events far beyond its apparent scale. Training in espionage emphasizes both practical skills and ethical judgment, instructing operatives in surveillance techniques, information analysis, secure communication, deception, and risk assessment, while also reinforcing the moral framework that governs the use of intelligence, ensuring that operatives understand the consequences of their actions, the importance of protecting autonomy, and the broader implications of their work for both human and synthetic actors, demonstrating the holistic integration of operational competence and ethical reasoning. The network's effectiveness is enhanced by redundancy, compartmentalization, and flexibility, which allow operatives to continue operations even in the event of localized compromise, and ensure that critical intelligence is preserved, analyzed, and acted upon without exposing the broader organization, illustrating the thoughtful application of organizational design principles to clandestine intelligence work. Interpersonal skills, discretion, and psychological insight are also central to espionage, as operatives must navigate human relationships, assess credibility, and manage interactions in ways that maximize information gathering while minimizing risk. And the railroad places significant emphasis on training in these areas, recognizing that intelligence is as much about understanding behavior and motivation as it is about technical observation or data collection, further reinforcing the faction's holistic approach to espionage. The railroad's intelligence network has tangible effects on the Commonwealth's operational landscape, as the anticipation of institute movements, knowledge of factional patrols, and awareness of environmental hazards allow the organization to execute missions with precision, avoid unnecessary confrontation, and protect synthetic populations, effectively shaping the behavior and decision-making of adversaries without overt engagement, illustrating the indirect yet significant influence of clandestine intelligence. Ultimately, the railroad's espionage and intelligence networks exemplify the integration of operational ingenuity, technical skill, analytical rigor, ethical discipline, and strategic foresight, demonstrating that a small, principled faction can sustain resilience, exert influence, and protect vulnerable populations in a hostile, technologically advanced environment. And the canonical portrayal of these networks within Fallout 4 reinforces the faction's identity as a clandestine, ethically driven, and strategically sophisticated actor capable of navigating moral ambiguity, technological complexity, and adversarial opposition, while leaving an enduring imprint on the social, political, and operational fabric of the Commonwealth. By maintaining secrecy, cultivating human and technological assets, analyzing patterns, and ethically applying intelligence, the railroad ensures that its espionage operations remain aligned with its overarching mission of protecting autonomy and life, illustrating the enduring relevance and canonical significance of intelligence networks as both practical tools and philosophical instruments within the faction's broader narrative of resistance, clandestine action, and moral principled engagement in the post-apocalyptic Commonwealth. The decline and the persistent challenges faced by the railroad in the Commonwealth reflect the inherent difficulties of sustaining a clandestine organization that operates against a technologically superior, ideologically rigid, and morally uncompromising adversary like the Institute, and these challenges are compounded by the fragmented, decentralized nature of the railroad itself, which, while providing resilience against infiltration, also creates vulnerabilities in communication, coordination, and operational continuity, requiring constant vigilance, adaptation, and resourcefulness on the part of both leadership and field operatives to maintain security, effectiveness, and the ethical integrity of the organization. The primary external pressure contributing to the railroad's decline arises from the Institute's relentless efforts to reclaim or neutralize synths, disrupt operational networks, and eliminate perceived threats, employing advanced synthetic agents, surveillance, technology, and strategic intelligence to detect safe houses, intercept communications, and target operatives, forcing the railroad to continuously innovate in counter-surveillance, encryption, and clandestine movement, while minimizing exposure and highlighting the asymmetrical struggle between a principled, resource-limited faction and a technologically dominant institution. Infiltration and betrayal pose another critical challenge, as the decentralized cell structure, while operationally advantageous, relies heavily on trust and compartmentalization, making the network particularly sensitive to compromised agents or human informants, and the exposure of a single operative or safe house can cascade into significant operational risk, necessitating rigorous vetting, ethical oversight, and contingency planning to ensure continuity of the mission, the protection of synths, and the preservation of operational security in an environment where a single misstep can have catastrophic consequences. The risk of operational exposure extends beyond the Institute, as the complex landscape of the Commonwealth includes other factions, opportunistic raiders, and even well-intentioned human settlements whose unawareness or curiosity can inadvertently compromise secrecy, creating a constant need for adaptive operational planning, secure communication protocols, and the strategic deployment of resources to mitigate the multifaceted threats posed by both adversaries and neutral actors, underscoring the precariousness of clandestine operations in a contested, post-apocalyptic setting. Resource limitations represent an ongoing internal challenge, as the railroad operates with finite personnel, equipment, and logistical support, requiring prioritization of missions, careful allocation of safe houses, and judicious use of technology, which introduces ethical and strategic dilemmas when decisions must be made regarding which synths to rescue, which operations to undertake, and how to deploy operatives most effectively, reflecting the persistent tension between idealism, operational necessity, and practical constraints that define the faction's operational reality. The psychological toll on operatives further exacerbates these challenges, as the constant threat of discovery, the weight of ethical decision-making, and the high stakes involved in protecting synthetic life demand sustained mental resilience, disciplined judgment, and the capacity to operate under extreme stress, with leaders tasked not only with operational oversight, but also with maintaining morale, cohesion, and ethical clarity among a network of decentralized, highly autonomous cells. Historical operations documented within canonical sources illustrate the interplay of these challenges, including instances in which safehouses were compromised, missions were aborted due to unforeseen institute activity, and operatives were lost or endangered, demonstrating that the railroad's decline is not a simple narrative of defeat, but rather a reflection of the cumulative pressures, risks, and ethical burdens inherent in maintaining a principled resistance within an environment dominated by superior technology, surveillance, and adversarial control. Technological adaptation is both a tool and a challenge, as the railroad must continually counteract institute surveillance, electronic security, and synthetic tracking, employing hacked terminals, improvised tools, and encrypted communication, while simultaneously training operatives in the use of these devices, integrating them into operational planning, and ensuring ethical application, revealing that the rapid pace of technological evolution imposes constant, operational, ethical, and strategic demands on a resource-limited clandestine faction. Internal ethical tensions emerge as challenges accumulate, particularly when operational necessity appears to conflict with moral principles, such as prioritizing one rescue over another, determining the acceptable level of risk to human collaborators, or deciding the appropriate use of deception and subterfuge, creating situations in which leadership must exercise discernment, philosophical clarity, and moral courage to ensure that the organization's actions remain consistent with its core principles, even under duress, demonstrating the inherent complexity of maintaining both operational effectiveness and ethical integrity in conditions of decline. Operational stress and attrition exacerbate these pressures, as the loss of experienced operatives, the compromise of safehouses, or the failure of extraction missions reduces institutional knowledge, field capacity, and strategic flexibility, forcing remaining personnel to assume greater responsibility, operate under more extreme conditions, and innovate under threat, while still adhering to the decentralized, ethical, and operational protocols that define the railroad, illustrating the dynamic interplay between organizational structure, ethical commitment, and operational resilience. Adversarial adaptation by the Institute and other factions further intensifies the railroad's challenges, as countermeasures, patrol optimization, intelligence gathering, and technological upgrades progressively constrain the faction's operational options, creating a strategic environment in which every mission must account for multiple contingencies, potential compromises, and ethical ramifications, and reinforcing the narrative of a high-stakes, asymmetrical struggle in which success is measured not only by tactical outcomes, but by the preservation of ethical standards, the protection of synthetic life, and the sustainability of clandestine networks. Despite these pressures, the railroad demonstrates remarkable resilience, drawing on the ingenuity of operatives, the flexibility of decentralized cells, and the strategic acumen of leaders like Desdemona, who guide the organization through periods of heightened risk, operational setbacks, and ethical uncertainty, ensuring that the mission persists even in the face of decline, and highlighting the canonical depiction of the faction as adaptive, morally grounded, and operationally sophisticated, capable of surviving against formidable opposition. Internal reflection and adaptive learning play critical roles in responding to these challenges, as every mission, setback, and operational observation is analyzed to refine protocols, improve risk management, enhance ethical guidance, and increase operational efficacy, demonstrating the integration of experiential learning, moral deliberation, and strategic planning into the organizational culture, and ensuring that decline is met with thoughtful adaptation rather than uncontrolled deterioration. The cumulative impact of these challenges is also reflected in the railroad's strategic posture, with leadership often emphasizing discretion, mission prioritization, and the careful expansion of safe-house networks to maintain resilience while avoiding overextension, illustrating that decline is not only a function of external pressure, but also of the balance between ambition, resource allocation, and risk management in a high-stakes, morally complex environment. Canonical accounts indicate that even in periods of acute threat or operational difficulty, the railroad's ethical commitments remain a guiding principle, shaping decision-making, prioritization, and strategic innovation, and ensuring that the organization's identity as a morally principled, clandestinely effective faction endures even as operational conditions deteriorate, reflecting a persistent tension between vulnerability and resilience that defines the faction's historical narrative. Ultimately, the decline and challenges faced by the railroad illuminate the broader realities of operating a clandestine, ethically driven organization within the Commonwealth, highlighting the interplay between technological asymmetry, adversarial pressure, resource limitations, ethical complexity, and organizational structure, and providing a canonical account of a faction that, despite facing sustained threats, internal and external pressures, and operational attrition, continues to sustain its mission, uphold its philosophical commitments, and adapt strategically, serving as both a narrative and moral exemplar within the Fallout universe, and underscoring the enduring tension between vulnerability and principled resistance, the limits of clandestine power, and the necessity of resilience, ingenuity, and ethical clarity in maintaining the protection of autonomy, freedom, and life under conditions of extreme adversity. The railroad's legacy and canonical significance within the Fallout universe are deeply intertwined with the faction's unwavering commitment to the protection of synthetic life, its ethical philosophy, and the operational ingenuity that has allowed it to persist in the hostile environment of the post-apocalyptic Commonwealth, and this legacy manifests both in the tangible outcomes of its clandestine activities and in the symbolic resonance of its moral and strategic principles, influencing the social, political, and technological landscape in ways that extend far beyond the immediate context of missions, safe houses, and operatives. At the most fundamental level, the railroad represents a principled resistance to systemic oppression, exemplifying the capacity of a small, ethically guided organization to challenge the dominance of a technologically superior and ideologically rigid institution like the Institute, and demonstrating that moral clarity, strategic foresight, operational resilience can combine to produce meaningful change even in the most constrained and adversarial circumstances. establishing a narrative of resistance that resonates throughout canonical accounts and player experiences. The tangible outcomes of the Railroad's work, including the liberation of synths, the creation of a network of safe houses, and the protection of individuals from surveillance, exploitation, or coercion, provide concrete evidence of the faction's influence, illustrating how clandestine operations can produce both immediate and long-term effects on the social and political dynamics of the Commonwealth, including shifts in factional strategies, adaptation by human and synthetic actors, and the establishment of moral and operational precedents that continue to inform behavior and decision-making within the environment, and reinforcing the canonical depiction of the Railroad as an effective, strategically sophisticated, and ethically coherent organization. Philosophically, the Railroad's legacy lies in its insistence on the primacy of autonomy, agency, and freedom for synthetic individuals, challenging conventional assumptions regarding property, obedience, and identity, and compelling both characters within the Fallout universe and players themselves to confront questions of ethical responsibility, moral courage, and the definition of sentient rights, thereby establishing the faction as a central lens through which themes of freedom, identity, and resistance are explored in canonical storytelling, and creating a narrative framework in which ethical principles are inseparable from operational action. The moral influence of the Railroad is also evident in its impact on other factions and individuals, as the presence of a principled, clandestine actor capable of subverting the Institute, assisting civilians, and protecting synths establishes both direct and indirect behavioral effects, including altered patrol patterns, the emergence of sympathetic allies, shifts in factional priorities, and the adoption of ethical considerations in decision-making by human actors who encounter the consequences of the Railroad's work, illustrating the organization's capacity to shape the moral and operational landscape even without overt recognition or visibility. From a technological perspective, the Railroad's adaptive use of Institute technology, repurposed devices, and improvised tools demonstrates a canonical model of innovation under constraint, illustrating how a decentralized and resource-limited organization can leverage intelligence, ingenuity, and operational creativity to counter superior adversaries, protect assets, and maintain the effectiveness of clandestine networks, while simultaneously providing a framework for understanding the interplay between technological mastery, ethical responsibility, and practical problem-solving in the post-apocalyptic setting. The canonical narrative of the Railroad also emphasizes the critical role of leadership, operatives, and ethical decision-making in sustaining resistance, highlighting figures such as Desdemona, Tinker Tom, and Deacon as exemplars of moral, strategic, and operational excellence whose personal philosophies, skills, and judgment shape both the success of missions and the enduring identity of the organization, and establishing a model for understanding how individual agency and principled leadership contribute to the long-term legacy of a clandestine faction operating in morally and operationally complex circumstances. The Railroad's operational history, including both triumphs and setbacks, contributes to its canonical significance by providing a detailed record of adaptive strategy, tactical innovation, and ethical negotiation, documenting the ways in which decentralized cells, intelligence networks, and carefully managed relationships with other factions collectively create resilience and continuity, and offering a narrative of persistence, ethical integrity, and strategic foresight that resonates within the broader context of the Fallout universe. The ethical dilemmas navigated by the Railroad, including prioritization of missions, risk assessment, engagement with human and synthetic actors, and the use of deception and subterfuge, further reinforce its canonical importance by illustrating the complexity of moral reasoning in a post-apocalyptic context, highlighting the tensions between principle and pragmatism, and providing a narrative model for the integration of ethical deliberation into operational practice, which enhances both the richness of the story and the philosophical depth of the faction. The Railroad's influence is also evident in its social and cultural impact, as liberated synths, sympathetic human allies, and even indirectly affected factions carry forward narratives of resistance, autonomy, and ethical action, contributing to a collective memory and understanding that extends beyond the organization itself, shaping perceptions of identity, freedom, and moral responsibility within the Commonwealth, and demonstrating that the legacy of a clandestine faction is not merely operational but also symbolic, philosophical, and culturally resonant. Moreover, the Railroad establishes a canonical precedent for the consideration of synthetic life as autonomous, sentient, and deserving of ethical protection, challenging the assumptions of other factions, the Institute, and the post-apocalyptic society at large, and reinforcing the narrative exploration of themes such as personhood, autonomy, and resistance in the Fallout universe, ensuring that its significance endures not only through the outcomes of missions, but also through the ideas, principles, and questions it introduces into the broader narrative. Strategically, the Railroad demonstrates the effectiveness of decentralized, clandestine, and ethically coherent networks in shaping the operational landscape of the Commonwealth, providing canonical evidence that small, highly adaptive, and morally committed organizations can exert influence over technologically dominant adversaries, guide the behavior of other factions, and protect vulnerable populations, thereby reinforcing the narrative trope of asymmetric resistance and principled action as central to the Fallout storyline. The resilience of the Railroad in the face of decline, infiltration, resource limitations, and sustained pressure from the Institute and other factions further underscores its canonical significance, illustrating how the integration of ethical clarity, operational ingenuity, and decentralized structure allows a principled faction to survive and exert influence even under extreme adversity, and highlighting the enduring narrative of perseverance, moral courage, and strategic sophistication that defines the organization's story. The Railroad's legacy is further cemented by its thematic contribution to the Fallout universe, as its existence raises questions about the nature of freedom, the responsibilities of sentient beings, and the moral obligations of those with power and knowledge, encouraging players, characters, and observers alike to engage with ethical, strategic, and philosophical considerations that extend beyond immediate gameplay or narrative events, creating a lasting imprint on canonical understanding and interpretation. In sum, the Railroad's legacy and canonical significance are multifaceted, encompassing operational achievement, moral leadership, ethical influence, technological adaptation, social and cultural impact, and thematic resonance, providing a comprehensive model of a clandestine organization whose principled action, strategic acumen, and ethical sophistication allow it to protect synthetic life, challenge powerful adversaries, influence the broader Commonwealth, and leave an enduring mark on both the narrative and philosophical fabric of the Fallout universe, and establishing the faction as a central reference point for understanding the interplay of freedom, identity, resistance, and morality within a post-apocalyptic society where survival, ethics, and agency are perpetually contested, negotiated, and defended, ensuring that the story of the Railroad remains a canonical exemplar of principled resistance, operational ingenuity, and the enduring pursuit of autonomy in the complex and morally ambiguous landscape of Fallout.